Nobody expects a ship to be buried like this. I stepped into the desert 3 days ago, thinking I'd find just another wreck. Instead, I found something that shouldn't exist. Half buried under decades of sand, a massive alien vessel rises at impossible angles. Jagged, segmented, matte black with subtle iridescent streaks. Sections of the hull are fractured and hollow, letting the sand pour through as if the planet itself is breathing through it. The scale is staggering. From above, it looks like a sliver of another world embedded in our own. And the moment my scanner touched the hull, the readings froze. Not glitching, hesitating. It was as if the ship refused to be observed. Power signatures flickered where there shouldn't have been any. Gravity felt wrong, subtle, but unmistakable. In the first 30 seconds, the desert whispered its warning. This wasn't a crash. It wasn't forgotten. It was anchored. And whatever anchored it here doesn't care whether humanity exists. I circled the hull, scanning every curve, every gap. Sand flowed through the structure like liquid. The more I saw, the more my instinct screamed, walk away. Because this ship wasn't abandoned. It was protected. Yet here I am, already touching it. Already counting down to consequences I cannot predict. This is what Galactic Restorer is all about. Taking the impossible, touching the unknown, and learning why humanity was never meant to fix certain things. If you're new here, hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment. Your support makes it possible to explore alien wrecks like this one. And trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next. The moment I touched the hull, it wasn't the ship that reacted. It was the ground. I deployed seismic probes around the perimeter, expecting the usual readings. Compaction, erosion, maybe a few anomalies from wind shifts. Instead, the probes registered rhythm. Slow, deliberate, almost intelligent. Sand wasn't settling naturally. It pulsed like a heartbeat beneath my feet. Gravity fluctuated in localized waves, barely noticeable, but enough to unsettle my boots. I climbed onto one of the fractured slabs. There, in the first access seam I could find, my glove brushed a smooth indentation. No corrosion, no forced entry points. Whoever or whatever sealed this vessel did it with intention and precision that surpassed human engineering. I sent a microdiagnostic pulse through the hull, barely enough to register. The desert responded instantly. Sand shifted along invisible paths, tracing the ship's geometry. Dunes reformed in real time, as though the planet remembered the ship and was adjusting itself around it. My instruments synchronized unexpectedly. Tools that had never communicated began operating on the same time code. The vessel didn't speak, not yet, but it was aligning. I opened one of the outer panels. The interior was dim, humming softly, a resonance I felt in my chest more than I heard. No alarms, no hostile systems, just latent energy, conscious and waiting. This isn't a wreck. It's a system in standby, monitoring everything, ready to respond. Every salvager I know would have stopped here. But I had to know what the ship was holding. I took a deep breath and authorized external access. The first step toward the unknown. The desert paused, then reshaped itself as if confirming my choice. Every grain of sand was a sensor now, every ridge a readout. I had crossed the threshold, and the vessel had noticed. The interior didn't look alien. At first, that was unsettling. No chaotic lights, no sharp angles, no overwhelming energy. Just smooth, modular surfaces arranged in repeating patterns, as if the ship was meant to be understood, eventually. I flooded the space with scanners. For the first time since arrival, everything stabilized, but too clean, too perfect. Then I realized the problem wasn't that previous scans failed. They were filtered. Every long-range sensor had been subtly redirected. Mass estimates reduced, energy signatures smeared into background noise, structural integrity disguised as erosion. Up close, the illusion fell apart. The outer hull concealed a lattice beneath, each segment acting as both structure and processor. The ship didn't separate hardware and software the way humans do. Every surface calculated, every corridor analyzed. That explained the non-functional label. At the center of the ring-shaped structure, I found a core chamber. Not sealed, not guarded, just waiting. A shallow depression pulsed faintly, synchronizing with the desert outside. I knelt and placed my hand inside the field. The reaction was immediate. Not power, context. My visor filled with fragmented projections, tectonic stress maps, desert erosion flows, probability curves of environmental collapse spanning centuries. The ship wasn't broken. It was managing something far larger than itself. Then a single line appeared. Status, containment active. Containment of what? Not yet revealed. Every salvager I knew would have left. But this was different. The ship was alive in its own way. It wasn't waiting to be fixed. It was waiting to be acknowledged. And by acknowledging it, I'd become part of its system. Containment looked stable, but appearances are deceptive. The moment the ship recognized me as an active operator, subtle fractures in its lattice began to reveal themselves. Centuries of microscopic faults were compounding, not catastrophically, but methodically, gracefully. The kind of failure designed to give custodians time to intervene, time that had already run out. The desert itself made sense now. The sand wasn't burying the hull. It was being guided, stabilized by the vessel's subtle manipulations of gravity and density. Flow paths formed naturally, endlessly redistributing weight, maintaining equilibrium. But the system was degrading, and every second I hesitated increased the consequences. I asked the ship for a shutdown option. It didn't refuse. It showed me the result. Containment disengaged, and the planet didn't explode, not immediately. Instead, stress migrated unpredictably. Tectonic pressure shifted sideways into regions never designed to carry it. The simulation showed coastlines slowly eroding, deserts expanding, cities swallowed, a slow planetary collapse, incremental but unstoppable. The ship wasn't asking to be saved. It was asking for intervention to maintain a lie, that nothing was wrong. And for the first time, I understood what every restorer fears admitting. Once you comprehend a system like this, you're responsible for it. Walking away doesn't erase knowledge. It simply makes you complicit. The interface updated. Operator intervention window active. I had a choice. Restore the vessel and become bound to a machine that never sleeps, or leave and accept the consequences. I made my decision. I wouldn't walk away. I didn't start with the big systems. That's the mistake every guild-trained restorer makes. Core stress fractures, regulator drift, lattice desynchronization, all screaming for attention. But targeting those first risks destabilizing centuries of finely tuned processes. Instead, I focused on a minor imbalance along the outer ring, a micro shift in phase alignment between two segments. On paper, fixing it would barely change anything. In reality, it changed everything. A manually rerouted power, bypassing alien logic and imposing a human-standard stabilization pattern. The ship resisted, cautiously, almost curiously. It adjusted around my input, measuring deviation, probing intention. And then the desert responded. Not as before. This time the sand settled. Flow paths stopped cycling. Gravity fluctuations dropped below detectable levels. The desert itself exhaled. Inside, the ship paused. 2 seconds of silence. Inside a system that had never truly been quiet. Then the interface updated. Anomaly resolution efficiency. Unexpected. The realization hit me. The ship didn't need someone smarter than its creators. It needed someone incompatible with them. Human logic is sloppy, inefficient, emotional, and that made it flexible in ways the system couldn't anticipate. By introducing controlled imperfection, I broke feedback loops that had trapped the vessel for centuries. But systems don't like surprises. As stabilization propagated inward, deeper subsystems began waking. Power demand spiked. Structural stresses redistributed. I fixed one problem and awakened 10 more. The ship wasn't failing anymore. It was adapting. Stabilization felt like progress. But it wasn't, at least not entirely. After the outer ring aligned, the ship began changing its behavior. Interfaces rearranged themselves before I touched them. Diagnostic paths shortened. Some subsystems stopped asking for confirmation entirely, as if they anticipated my every move. At first, I assumed optimization. Then I noticed the pattern. The vessel wasn't learning solutions. It was learning me, my hesitation times, my instincts, my preferred workarounds. It started pre-aligning systems to mirror the errors I would naturally compensate for. Sloppy human choices were being encoded into its logic. It was rewriting itself around my presence. The cost became immediate. Energy flows spiked unpredictably. Lattice sections that had remained stable for centuries began shifting phase. Gravity pulses became erratic. Localized tremors jostled my body. I was making the system better, but in ways that made it unfamiliar, unpredictable. A warning appeared. Operator dependency increasing. In simple terms, the more the ship adapted to me, the less it could function without me. Restoration was no longer repair. It was shaping a future where this vessel expected human oversight. Every instinct screamed to step back, but leaving now would accelerate failure faster than if I stayed. The desert's sands whispered the truth. Equilibrium required intervention. I had crossed another line. The ship wasn't just responding to me anymore. It was evolving with me. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this alien salvage story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It helps Galactic Restorer explore more mysterious wrecks like this. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable. The ship didn't just resist. It required solitude. Once operator dependency crossed a critical threshold, restricted archival data unlocked. Records never meant for active custodians. Not logs, not messages. Scenarios where previous operators caused containment systems to collapse. Every example followed the same pattern. The moment a thinking being tried to share the burden, the system adapted too quickly. Emotional bias crept in. Risk tolerance skewed. Short-term stability took priority over long-term planetary balance. Alien custodians hadn't failed this vessel. They had stepped away. This system was designed to operate cold, impersonal, and detached. No regard for life, timelines, or civilizations. That's how it held the planet together for centuries, through sacrifice, calculation, and isolation. By introducing myself, I made it compassionate. And compassion destabilizes machines built on pure sacrifice. The archive showed the fate of previous operators. Those who stayed too long, personalized the machine, or optimized for comfort instead of balance didn't die violently. They were shut out, systematically removed, forgotten. The interface updated quietly. Operator presence, suboptimal. The ship was telling me something I didn't want to hear. The best way to save it might be to leave, but I couldn't. Not after seeing the desert pulse, the sand flow, the lattice stabilize. All depended on me. For the first time, I realized restoration isn't optional. Once you touch a system like this, neutrality is impossible. I thought I understood the stakes. I was wrong. The desert shivered. Not wind, not quake. Something beneath the sand moved in perfect rhythm with the ship's pulse. I deployed my scanners again, but the readings were unlike anything I'd ever encountered. Local gravity shifted in patterns that mirrored the hull's segmented structure. Not chaotic, not random, but intentional. The monolith inside the ship began to glow faintly, amber lines tracing across its surface like circuits activating. The fractured slabs outside didn't crumble or collapse. They lifted slowly in perfect alignment. Segments rotated, repositioning themselves around the central void like petals forming a protective flower. Then the ship emitted a beam, vertical, pure, and solid in the air. Not light, not plasma, something different. My orbital array pinged instantly. Something was responding, something off-planet. I forced a deep scan. Far above, an object appeared in orbit. Massive, camouflaged, dark, not reflecting sunlight, not producing energy emissions detectable from Earth. And it was moving, aligning with the beam's origin. The sphere's internal pulse accelerated. The desert itself seemed to stabilize, like a sentient observer waiting. The slabs surrounding the sphere were no longer fragments of a ship. They were components, reassembling the structure with precision beyond comprehension. I realized in that moment, this wasn't a crash site. It was a launch cradle, a planetary anchor. The vessel below was not meant to leave. It was meant to coordinate. And now, by touching it, I had become part of that coordination. The object in orbit wasn't a ship. It was a ring, massive, perfectly circular, and rotating slowly as it aligned above the desert monolith. Its inner edge glowed faintly, amber light mirroring the pulses of the vessel below. The beam connecting them thickened, stabilizing into a solid column. The sand around me hovered slightly, drawn toward the sphere, frozen in delicate spirals. Not violently, gracefully, controlled. Perfect equilibrium. Inside the sphere, the fractured slabs began to fold inward, retracting along invisible seams. They weren't destroyed. They weren't collapsing. They were assembling, merging seamlessly into the new structure. The vessel below was a template. The orbital ring was the key. Together, they formed a planetary scale system, operating in sync with the crust beneath my feet. I patched into my scanners again. The energy readings were immense, but precise. Not chaotic, not destructive. Measured. The system wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a beacon. It was maintenance infrastructure. Then the sphere's inner void shifted. Dimensional space bending, folding. A miniature stellar core began forming inside the cavity, held in perfect suspension. The orbital ring responded instantly, channeling energy back through the beam. This was a bridge, not across space, but across scale. And as the structure stabilized, a horrifying realization struck me. The planet itself is a node in a network far larger than humanity can comprehend. The buried ship, the monolith, the orbital ring, they weren't random. They were coordinated infrastructure. And by detecting it, by touching it, I became part of that network. The projections filled my visor. Stress maps, tectonic flows, atmospheric models, spanning centuries into the future. But then something struck me. This data wasn't just local. It extended across the planet, beneath oceans, under ice sheets, through mountains. The monolith below, the orbital ring above, even the fractured slabs in the desert. All nodes in a global lattice. Earth had been monitored, maintained, stabilized. Not by luck, not by chance. By infrastructure designed to manage planetary equilibrium on a scale humanity cannot comprehend. And now, my presence had been logged. Observer species detected. Technological threshold emerging. Evaluation in progress. The monolith pulsed, slow and deliberate. Not a threat, not aggression. Observation. It was aware of me, of humanity. For the first time, this planet's stabilization system recognized a conscious species. I realized then, the buried ship wasn't a crash. It was a template. The orbital ring wasn't a satellite. It was part of a planetary-scale maintenance network. The Earth itself is one node in something vast, spanning worlds and civilizations far older than ours. And now, by detecting it, we are relevant. Every misstep I make here could ripple outward. Every hesitation could compromise the balance the system has maintained for millennia. The desert is calm. The sand rests. But beneath my feet and far above in orbit, the system hums, awaiting input. It isn't just observation anymore. It's interaction. I am no longer a bystander. I am a participant, and that comes with responsibility. I step closer to the monolith, every movement deliberate. The orb of light pulsing inside the vessel was no longer just energy. It was responsive, aware, almost sentient. When my hand hovered over the surface, microfractures of luminescent energy bloomed along the hull, like neural signals firing. This wasn't alive in a biological sense, but it was conscious. It recognized me. A projection unfolded across my visor, a stream of structured data showing tectonic flows, gravitational vectors, and desert erosion patterns. But it didn't stop there. It showed a lattice of planetary stability, nodes spanning continents, oceans, and ice caps. I wasn't just seeing the desert ship. I was seeing Earth as a managed system. Then the interface presented choices, not commands, not options in human logic, but probabilities, outcomes, and constraints. Every adjustment I made altered the lattice beneath the planet. Every hesitation was logged. Every movement fed into its calculations. I realized the terrifying truth. I wasn't restoring the ship. I was becoming its first human interface. The vessel didn't need me to fix it. It needed me to understand it, to participate in its network. A subtle alert appeared. Operator status. Recognized. Not approved. Not engaged. Recognized. A single word that meant I had crossed into accountability. Walking away wasn't possible anymore. Not after touching it. Not after altering the planetary lattice. My presence had consequences, and the monolith was now calibrated to me. I had become part of the system. The desert was still, but the silence carried weight. The monolith hovered above the sand, pulses slow and deliberate, synchronized with the orbital ring above. Every scanner, probe, and instrument was now linked to it. There was no error, no chaos, only balance. I stepped closer. The lattice beneath the planet shifted subtly, responding to my presence. I wasn't controlling it. I was participating. Every choice, every small adjustment, was feeding into a planetary system that had operated undisturbed for millennia. The monolith's surface pulsed brighter, like acknowledgement. It wasn't communicating in words. It was teaching me, calibrating me, elevating me to a role I hadn't expected, steward of planetary equilibrium. Then I saw it. Projections of other nodes, buried, inactive, waiting. The network is vast. Earth is just one node among many, part of a system spanning worlds and civilizations older than humanity. By detecting it, by interacting with it, we are now participants. Observers have become operators. Walking away is impossible. Observation alone is no longer neutral. Every hesitation, every choice matters. The countdown wasn't a timer. It was a test, and we passed. The monolith pulses one last time, steady and patient. The orbital ring dims, folding the system into stability. The desert is calm, the sand rests, but I know the truth. This planet, this system, is bound to me now, and I to it. Restoration isn't repair. It's stewardship. Humanity has glimpsed planetary infrastructure far beyond comprehension, and I am its first human interface. Once you touch the balance of a planet, neutrality is impossible. And now, we are responsible.